it is good to copy and paste if we identify the answer? I would say yes, but in the exam, I want to clarify one confusion from the last audio, because the last audio I did talks about copy and paste, and I did in the video I copied and pasted a lot of information. But unfortunately, in the real exam, we are not able to copy and paste. We have to type. Hello everyone, this is Shaanee. Now continue from last week's question about summarize written task. So last week we talked about the possible mistake that everyone is making when we're taking exam for summarize written task in writing part. So we talked about the possible mistake that a lot of you guys are actually copy, not actual copy. You actually copy original sentence by typing into the box. And then on top of that, some of you guys doesn't use any connectors, and your sentences are too random or too short or too long, or you have all of these structure problems. Now today, we're going to talk about how we can actually solve these problems in an appropriate way. Before we go ahead, so I have some questions for you guys. It was actually a homework for you guys to leave under the comments. In that case, I can take your question to discuss about the problems, and then we answer the question in a right way. Now, so I have two possible answers from one student. Number one is, so he write actually two answers. So let's look at here. So answer one, he answered this passage. If some of you haven't listened to the previous audio, so I suggest you pause the screen a little bit. In that case, you can read this article so you know what is going on here. So the number one answer that this gentleman wrote was about there has been a dramatic increase in the participant of the beauty pageants contest in the country after winning the title by two Australians, and more youngsters are inclined to having the perfect shape by any means. However, these are hazardous to the mental health of young Australians. So first of all, this gentleman copied and paraphrased the first sentence from the original sentence, which is this one. So I'm going to underline this, and then he paraphrased a little bit something over here. Here. And then on top of that, this gentleman didn't mention anything that happened in the middle part. And on top of that, what he did was he summarized things from the ending part of the passage. So this is a big paraphrase from this part. So under this case, I want to ask a question for this gentleman and for any of you guys. If you're writing the similar summary, what about the middle part of the passage? So from this part to this part, what are these contents? So you might want to ask yourself a question. So if you're writing something for this passage, you're writing a summary. This passage is pretty long. You have your topic. Yes, you did summarize something at the end, but what about the body part? In that case, you didn't mention anything in the body part. I would say you are missing your contents. And again, this gentleman wrote roughly 48 words, and that is too short. Missing contents. Now, that's the first one. Now, let's look at the second answer. The second answer, this gentleman wrote, interest in the beauty pageants contest has increased in the country after winning the contest by two Australians. First of all, grammar mistakes by two Australians, which some components argue that there are just a symbol of decline. More Australians are trying to lose weight by all means, despite having health BMI that is profoundly hazardous to mental health. All right, so from this part, so this gentleman mentioned something from the beginning. So now I'm going to take this one off. So this gentleman mentioned the topic in the topic sentence, and on top of that, this gentleman mentioned something in the middle part, something around here. And apart from that, that's pretty much all this gentleman has been mentioned. And I want to ask another question. Yes, he mentioned something about Australians are losing weight. He did something over here about, just paraphrase. Okay, now I have two questions. First of all, see, I was struggling about finding losing weight from here, this part, because from your passage there are certain keywords that has got mentioned. So number one, let's find out the keyword lose weight. Here. Next one, how's BMI? Okay, has this mental health? So from the above passage, I don't know about you guys, from my perspective, I am not able to find what I highlighted those 3 parts in green from the above passage. Under this case, how can the computer recognize your keywords? You do have something, but the problem is you mentioned something extra that is not existed in the passage. So under this case, even though you have 50 words, but still you don't have enough contents from the original passage. You paraphrased too much, so it's irrelevant. And again, 50 words is still too short. So you need to write a little bit more than 50 words for the above passage. If you're having a passage shorter than this one, yes, 50 is enough. But this passage is a bit long, so 50 is 100% not enough. So make sure that you don't add extra content word by paraphrasing the original key content words, okay? Keep your passage simple. Now, apart from this gentleman's summary, I do have a few questions from some of you below the comments. So you were asking, see if you can use semicolon before however, or furthermore, I add any comma after this ones. So for this one, I can answer you, if you want to use any punctuations, be simple because you're not sure whether you're correct or not. So under this case, just be simple. Every time when you finish something, so let's say you are writing a sentence somehow. Okay, you're writing a sentence somehow over here, and you're trying to use a comma, fine. But you always leave a space, and then you use however. I'm going to use a small case. Okay, here we go. And then you have a comma right after your however, and then you have a space. And if you want to use another connector, that is fine. It doesn't matter which connector you're using. If every time you're using a connector, just make sure that you leave a comma for the previous sentence and leave a space before you write another connector. And also after the connector, you need another space. Here we go. So that's a mistake. Another space. And if you use any other connectors, for example, you use, let's say, all over, fine, you have another space in here. I hope this is clear for you. Assume this is you finishing up here, then you need to have your full stop. If you're not, you just continue with another connector. So make sure that your connectors should be like this. I'm going to highlight in another color, so in that case it's not confusing. So this is something that you should have in your exam. So this we should start. So you know those are important for you. Okay? All right, so next question. It is good to copy and paste if we identify the answer. I will say yes, but in the exam, I want to clarify one confusion from the last audio, because the last audio I did talks about copy and paste, and I did in the video I copied and pasted a lot of information. But unfortunately, in the real exam, we are not able to copy and paste. We have to type. Even though you like the original sentence word by word, but just copy by typing. You type word by word into the square box below the original question. So yes, it is good when you like the original sentence. You don't need to do any paraphrasing. You just type word by word according to the original passage, and that's a yes. Okay, so now let's go to the next question. Next question says, in the summarized written task, first and last sentence joined with a connector and the answer is ready. Is this trick useful or not? I will say this trick is useful for 80% of the passage. So why I say this way? Because in the exam, there is no such guarantee that you're going to have a perfect passage, that the topic sentence is topic, last sentence is your conclusion. Sometimes they might be tricky, but most of the case, yes. And most of the case, under case that you got a question that is really difficult, you read it once, you're not able to understand anything. Under this case, just use this trick. First sentence, last sentence will do. It's better than you don't know anything, or you copied anything, or you paraphrased a lot of contents. So I hope this is clear for you guys. And now let's talk about the real way, or the proper exam way of how to solve this question. So I'm going to use a highlight to just help you to explain for a better explanation. In the real exam, you cannot highlight. There's no highlight in the real exam. So this is for a better understanding for you. It's just for explanation. So I'm going to use highlight, and I'm going to add some extra contents in here. So number one, you have roughly around 10 minutes in the exam. So for this 10 minutes, you have to use them. Use as much as you can. So some of you guys use like 5 minutes or 6 minutes. So what are you going to do? You're going to finish this exam like 2 minutes or 3 minutes earlier. So you're gonna save the world, or you're gonna do something huge. So sitting there, keep calm, let's do it. So you read this passage once, you can pause the screen. For each article, I suggest you separate them into 3 parts, equivalent 3 parts. And then out of these 3 parts, you will be able to find something that are useful. So I can tell myself, I have my introduction, I have my body, I also have my conclusion. So now after you're reading, you know what kind of information are important. If there are certain information mentioned randomly once or twice, then we don't need it. For example, a person's name or something that is quite useless, or certain quotation. Quotation are something that it can be useful, but 99% of the chance the quotations are useless, then you can ignore them. Or sometimes you can see there are like examples. For example, for instance, as soon as you see those words, then they are useless. There are examples. We don't need detailed information in a summary. So now let's look at this passage. From the first part, since Australian Jennifer Hawkins and then Lauren someone were convinced Miss Australian and Miss Teen International respectively. So after you read this passage, you can ask yourself, what is this passage is about? Is this passage about this true person, Miss Australia or Miss International, or is this passage about beauty pageants? If this passage is about beauty pageants, then you go to look for the content words from the passage. Then you need to ignore those words. So those are useless. They are the trap for you, because those are just like introducing topic sentence. So you can ignore this sentence. So those are no, because this passage is not about those 2 people. It's about beauty pageants. Now, there has been a dramatic increase in interest in beauty pageants in this country. These trends have also sparked a debate as to whether beauty pageants are just a harmless reminder of old-fashioned values or a throwback to the days when women were respected for how good they look. Opponents argue that beauty pageants, whether it's this and this. So you can see the first part of the passage, I have these 2 parts, I can ignore them because they are something that is useless. And then for the rest of the part, it's quite good, quite important, but the problem is we cannot copy so much information into the summary. So what I'm going to do is we just keep something that is useful. So there has been a dramatic increase in interest in beauty pageants. In where? You can change them in Australia, or if you don't want to, you don't need to. Or some of you want to add it, fine, you can use Australia. So in that case, you can just add this word. And then we continue. These twins have sparked a debate. Obviously, we don't need this part about whether what. So this is a structure of this sentence. So again, we don't need this part of information, but the rest of the parts might look good. Beauty pageants are just harmless reminders of old-fashioned values or throwback to the days when women were respected for how good they look. So under this case, this sentence is pretty good, but again, it's pretty long. So every time when we see and or, so those 2 words are always link something that have similar meanings or contents. In that case, we can choose to keep one. Because it's a summary, we want our information to be simple and to be direct. So in that case, I will probably now just ignore this part. So now, for the first part of the passage, what I have got in my hand is this one. So I'm going to highlight it in another color, purple. So from the first introduction part, I eliminated all the unnecessary information. So now that's all I have. So now let's continue for the second part. Are dreaming to women and out of sync with the time. For this sentence, there is no actual meaning for me, so I'm going to ignore this one and continue. They say they are nothing more than symbols of decline. So no information again, delete. In the past few decades, Australia has taken more than a few flattering steps towards treating women with dignity and respect. Sounds pretty good, and young women were being brought up knowing that they can't do anything, as shown by inspiring role model in medicine such as 2003 Australian of the Year profession Fiona Stanley. So here there's something, the Fiona Stanley, this name has only been mentioned once. That means this is just one example for a better explanation. So in that case, this sentence, we don't need it. So I want to repeat here again, whenever you have some name, a particular name or institute or organization that only be mentioned once in that article, then we can ignore them. That's only about explanation about a certain idea. And then now we have another sentence left in here. In the 1960s and 70s, one of the first acts of the feminist movement was to pick beauty pageants on the premises, and the industry promoted the view that it was acceptable to judge acceptable to judges women on their appearance. So for this part, there's another example. It's about in the particular time what happened to the attitudes on the woman. So we can ignore this part again. So these two parts I want to emphasize one more time. So in the exam, yes, there are some articles that you have a particular name, event, or act, or certain time period has got mentioned. If those things has been only mentioned once, then we can simply ignore them because they are just examples to support the certain idea or support certain point. And under exam case, there are sometimes a lot of things about a list of example. They give you a time. So for example, instead of this time in this article, they give you like 1950 something happened, 1980 something happened, 2000 something happened. But whenever you see a list of similar structured sentences that got mentioned, you can ignore them without even reading them. So that will be just simply example. And now we have the last part left in this passage. So before we go ahead, I just need to highlight this part so it's clear for you. So what I got left for this sentence in this article is here. And now, so today, many young Australian women are still profoundly uncomfortable with their body image, feeling under all kinds of pressure because they are judged by how they look. Almost all the pageant victors are wafer thin, reinforcing the message that thin equals beautiful. This ignores the fact that men and women come in all sizes and shapes in the country where up to 60% of young Australians. So this part of the percentage, we don't normally include percentage in the article, but sometimes it does. So you can leave in here first before you make any further decision. So now we have 3 sentences in here. We need to decide which sentence that we can use as our conclusion. We don't normally keep everything, or sometimes we cut a little bit of everything from each sentence. So now, every time when we see a small time change, normally we keep it. For example, you have after 30 years, today, or now, after 15 years, after 10 years, or after a small time period. Anyway, so normally this is a hint that there is a change. So today, many young Australians are still profoundly uncomfortable with their body image. So this is the change from this passage. We can simply keep that. I'm feeling under what? So this part, they are uncomfortable. So this part are actually an explanation about why they're feeling uncomfortable. So we don't need this part. We can ignore this one. Next one, almost all the pageant victors are thin. So this one, again, this is about their body image, another explanation. And then the last part is this ignore the fact of men and women come in all sizes and shapes. So this sentence is quite conclusive. So we can keep this sentence. But again, when we look at everything in a country where up to 60% of young Australians, if you're not sure, you can leave there first. Depends on how many words we have. If your word limit exceeds 65 plus, then you can just ignore this last sentence. Now, this is all the highlighted we have. Unfortunately, again, in the real exam, you are not able to do the highlight. I'm here just to help you to have a better understanding about how to do the whole thing. You have to use your eyes to do all this highlighting work in the real exam. So this is everything we got. So now I'm going to copy everything into the answer sheet. So I'm going to do a copy thing because I'm going to save some time. Otherwise, it takes too long to type. I'm going to copy this one in here, and I'm going to trim off all the unnecessary information to make sure that we write a good summary. Here we go. So we need to make sure that the first letter is capital. There has been a dramatic increase in beauty pageants in here. Now we're going to put in here in Australia. And now here there's something repeated. Beauty pageants are just harmless reminders. So I'm going to change this word into are, which are just harmless reminder of old-fashioned values when women were respected for how good they look. And now we need something to link with another sentence. In the past few years, so there is kind of like a similar contents. People were respected for this. Then what you can do is you can just add any connectors. You can use your furthermore. Anything, any connectors that you can link in here. In the past few decades, they've taken few flights with treating women with dignity and respect. And now what we're going to do is we're going to delete everything in here. And we're going to add something over here. So first of all, we're going to change this one in small writing. And before we start, here, there's something contradicting. So in here, I can use however. Today, many young Australian women were still profoundly uncomfortable with their body image. Now it comes to the ending part. So you can add in conclusion or anything conclusion words. I will just use thus. It's easier. And then I'm going to uncolor this one. So this is everything I got now. So I'm going to double check how many words that we're having. So in here, I'm having 91. So that's obviously too much, 91. So I'm going to trim off a little bit. So let's see how we're going to do this job. There has been a dramatic increase in interest. There have been a dramatic increase in interest in beauty pageants in Australia, which are just harmless reminders. So I have Australia mentioned in here. So under this case, I'm going to ignore this one. There is a dramatic increase in interest in beauty, which are harmless reminder of old-fashioned values, and women were respected for how good they look. Furthermore, in the past few decades, Australia has taken a few flattering steps towards treating women with dignity and respect. However, today, many young Australian women were still profoundly uncomfortable with their body image. They ignore the fact that all women and men come with all sizes and shapes. So I'm going to ignore the last sentence because it's quite useless in here. So again, I'm going to double check in here. So I'm still having a lot, 79. So again, we're going to trim off. I'm going to cut this one. So now I'm having 71. 71 is something that is quite, again, too much. We need to trim it off. Try to write your contents less than 70 words because even though the original question asked us to write in between 5 to 75, but when we are writing a one-sentence summary without any grammar mistakes for 70 words, it can be very difficult. So I suggest you guys to write less than 70 words, but don't write less than 30 or less than 40 words. That would be too short. Okay, so now let's work on this one. This is the part that we need to use our skill to trim off, to simplify your contents. Okay, so now let's work on this one. So what we can do is we can cut this part. So now we have roughly 62 words. So this will be a proper answer of the above question. Okay, so that's it. And then inside of the paragraph, you can see we started something from the beginning, and the first letter is capital, and we only have one full stop in here. And inside of the body, we did use the certain connectors to link all of the information together. So this is just a simple answer for this one. And now we're going to do one exercise, and this exercise has been done by one student online. So you can do this on your own, and we check the answers together as well. So now this is one particular example the students has done. So you can pause the screen again to think about how you actually do this question. And then I'm going to check the students' answer here. The students has right an answer. So although after Namibia gained independence in 1990, pascaline, flora, and other indigenous habitats considered wildlife as their enemy, and the wildlife poaching was quite common in rural communal land. Later, after 15 years, once pascaline appointed as a first manager, her village benefited from government efforts, and they considered wildlife as creating job and opportunities as well as better environment. So this is a summary that has actually beautiful content, very, very good. I just need to suggest to you guys to add a little bit of comma. Although after this one, so you should have a comma in here. That will be better for the computer to recognize all your contents. As their enemy and wildlife was quite common in communal land. Later, after 15 years, so again in here you can add this one, appointed as a first black manager. Here once the black manager, her village benefited from government efforts, and they consider wildlife as creating jobs and opportunities as well as better environment. So this one has beautiful contents, but you might have a few mark less in your grammar. So the grammar is a bit like not that good. So we work on this one again to see how we actually got all the contents. So this gentleman highlighted everything you got over in here, and you found 𝗠cie𝗰𝗸 as the correct information. And he also mentioned something about consider the wildlife about as the enemy. And also this gentleman also mentioned about the change after that. So 𝗠cie𝗰𝗸 was the first black manager of the guest lodge, and then they got benefit from the government efforts. And then the good thing is this gentleman included the last part, wildlife creating jobs and opportunities, and also is good for the environment. This is very good. You got everything. But there's something little extra that you can add it a little bit more. We just put everything together. So at the beginning part, again, we separate this passage into 3 parts. And you can see they gained independence. 𝗠cie𝗰𝗸 was herding goats. We don't need this teenager. So he was herding goats, and then he was protecting something. And there was a change after 15 years that you actually missed it. She actually built a career in tourism. So this is something that you have actually missed it. She actually built a career in tourism, and all the rest of the parts are perfect. So when you link them together, I'm just do a small fixing in here. Although, so you can just say Namibia gained independence in 1990, 𝗠cie𝗰𝗸, Flori, and other agencies considered wildlife. So we don't want to change the sequence of the original passage. What happens in here is wildlife as enemy came before the indigenous inhabitants of Namibian. So we don't want to change the sequence in here. So in that case, you don't need to add this part. So you can just simply use this one. Considered wildlife as their enemy, and wildlife poaching was quite common in this part. How after 15 years, you can just say in here, there's very obvious, there's a change. So you can use however, or why after 15 years, 𝗠cie𝗰𝗸, here, we just need to delete this one. 𝗠cie𝗰𝗸 built career in tourism, and appointed as the first black manager. Here we go. You can add your meanwhile. Meanwhile, her village benefited from government efforts. And then in here, this is obviously our ending part. So what you can do, so they considered wildlife as creating jobs on a wildlife. They considered the wildlife so they considered that wildlife cannot only, it's just a grammar fixing, create jobs and opportunities, but also better, but also benefit environment, So under this case, the summary looks much better and it's quite clear. So that's the proper way of doing our summary. Let's double check the vocabularies in here. So you have in total 61 words, and that would be perfect. So now this is a rough introduction about how we actually write a proper summarized written task without making a lot of silly mistakes. And you can simply get your mark in a very simple way. Yes, you don't need to paraphrase too much. You just need to follow the original passage. And yes, you just need to type the original word by word. Be very simple, very direct, And that's it. Just double check your grammar mistakes at the end of the day. So now I hope I answered all you guys' questions. If you have any questions, please leave in the comments. And if you like this video, you found this video is very helpful for your PTE, for your essay, for your summaries, please give me a thumb up. And if you want any other further information, please leave in the comments, and I will follow you up for more information or the other videos that I can help you in the best way. On top of that, please follow us on the Facebook, because we actually post a lot of new informations and new remindings on the Facebook. So in that case, you can find that is helpful. And also follow us on the Instagram as well, because you can find something fun. We are trying to work on something fun on Instagram as well. But anyway, all the best, guys, and I hope you guys pass your 90 as soon as possible. And I hope you get your dream come true. Now, let's finish this class now, and I'll see you next time. Thank you.